Ladies and gentlemen, it's time to dial in. A fully new and rebranded show is officially underway. Welcome to, I guess I wouldn't even say the first episode, but welcome to the official inauguration of Dialed In with Collin O'Callahan. It is yours truly, and I am absolutely fired up to actually finally be able to, launch something like this. So you might be asking yourself, why dialed in? Why was this the name that you chose? Well, it's a pretty simple story. I was in a group chat with a lot of my friends at journalism school, and we're bantering back and forth, and we're talking about the 49ers Rams game that was coming up. This was like a few weeks ago. And one of my best friends, Caleb, asked me, Colin, how dialed in are you right now? And I just pretty much, replied with a witty answer. Caleb, it's me. I'm always dialed in. And everyone got a kick out of it. And I liked it. And it somehow stuck because when we were doing sports commentary shows, we have to do those every week. That's pretty much our assignment every single quarter. Um, another one of my best friends, Catherine Silva, when she was doing the anchor, when she was doing one of the anchor assignments, when she tossed over to me as the reporter, the first question she asked me, Colin, how dialed in are you right now? And so it pretty much just became a trend. I started using that saying more often. And here we are today, fully rebranded, fully improved, but it's still me doing a bunch of rambling and stammering and you know what. So I think with all that being said, I'm super excited. We're going to jump right into it. Week 8 is officially underway. Wow, week 8. That's actually kind of mind blowing when you say it out loud. Let me just share the screen right here and boom. All right, so we should pull up the schedule because we're going to need to know which games are being played. But before we do that, we're going to go through the teams that are on a bye right now. The Raiders, the Lions, the Seahawks, and the Cardinals. We're going to talk about all 4 of them eventually as the show progresses. But one game, or 2 teams rather, that played against each other last week that are now on a bye because they were both in London. The Los Angeles Rams and the Jacksonville Jaguars. The Rams beat the Jaguars 35-7 at Wembley Stadium last Sunday morning. Matthew Stafford threw 5 touchdown passes, while the Jacksonville Jaguars were down 28-0 at one point. They were 2 for 6 on 4th down, and their only touchdown didn't come until garbage time, and they just simply got outplayed from start to finish. And the worst part about it for the Jaguars defense was that A, they didn't force a turnover, and B, this was without Puka Nacua. I mean, Devontae Adams had a couple touchdown passes. Terrence Ferguson, the rookie tight end, he had his first career score. Kyra Williams was pretty decent on the ground. I was definitely expecting a little more from Jordan Whittington, the second-year guy out of Texas. I thought he was going to be a little bit more of a focal point, but now that, the numbers haven't really been what I thought they could be, he is probably going to be a bubble player for the next offseason. What I mean by that is you better hope that you'll have an outstanding preseason or else you're probably going to get cut. As for Trevor Lawrence and the Jaguars offense, I don't think moving the ball was a significant issue. It was just the Rams used the exact same blueprint that the Seahawks used last week when they won that game. Shut down the run and pressure Trevor Lawrence as many times as possible. If I remember correctly, they sacked Trevor Lawrence 7 times, which makes it the 14th time in 2 weeks that Trevor Lawrence has been taken down to the ground. Travis Etienne, 8 carries, 44 yards. Brian Thomas Jr., he only caught 2 passes. 2 for 10 on 3rd down, 2 for 6 on 4th, 3 for 15 on 3rd down, I should say. 3 for 15 on 3rd down, 2 for 6 on 4th, 13 penalties for 112 yards. Those are literally the 3 basic ingredients to losing football games. Now, they didn't turn the ball over. I mean, granted, you didn't, do the one costly thing that everybody, messes up on. But at the same time, they just, like I said earlier, they just got visibly outplayed by a better team. And unfortunately, the Jaguars have pretty much maxed out since they beat the Kansas City Chiefs a couple of weeks ago. The Rams, they're still in a solid spot right now. They're still tied for the division lead, but they're 3rd place because they lost to the 49ers. And with the Seahawks, I think I could click on this just to figure this out. Percent versus the league and percent versus the division. Okay, so Seattle's 1-1. They beat Arizona. They lost to San Francisco. And the Rams, they haven't really, like I said, the 49ers are the only team in the division that they've played. So there's still time for LA to, leapfrog their way into the standings. But I mean, the silver lining is that, they're not Arizona right now. But we'll get into that in just a second. Let's just jump right into these games. We got the Vikings and the Chargers tonight at 8:15 p.m. Eastern, 7:15 p.m. Central on Amazon Prime. This is honestly going to be a pretty interesting game if you ask me, because you have an up and down Vikings team going up against a Chargers squad that is just in a very, very concerning slump right now. I mean, the Minnesota Vikings, they had multiple chances to beat the Philadelphia Eagles last week. Jalen Hurts had a perfect passer rating. He was absolutely phenomenal. Devontae Smith, he caught 9 passes for 183 yards. A.J. Brown, 121 yards on just 4 receptions. He had the huge fourth down play at the opening drive to put them ahead 7-0. And then on the last play, he beat Isaiah Rodgers on a double move for a huge completion down the field that put everything on ice. So we finally saw, the flashes from Philadelphia's offense that, we'd been expecting all season long. And this was despite Saquon Barkley getting held to, 2.7 yards a clip. So that was definitely an outstanding performance by Hurts. The defense, they didn't do too bad of a job themselves. They let up a lot of points, but 1 for 5 in the red zone. They forced 2 interceptions in the first half. One of them a pick six from Jalen Hunt, which ended up being costly for Carson Wentz and the Minnesota Vikings, because those 7 points, turned out to be the biggest difference in the football game. But, even with those picks, they had so many chances inside the 20-yard line, and yet they relied on Will Reichert and his big leg to make 5 field goals just for them to stay in the game. The Chargers, on the other hand, they got absolutely ramrodded by the Indianapolis Colts on Sunday afternoon. Their defense gave up a score on almost every single drive. They had no answers for Jonathan Taylor or Daniel Jones. Justin Herbert was down 23-3 at halftime because he threw 2 interceptions. And yes, everyone's going to point out, well, he threw for 400 yards. He doesn't really have a running game. They don't have an offensive line. They were down 38-17 at one point. So I don't really care so much about the 400 yards, because a lot of those were empty calories. They had that 21-play drive near the end of the game, and they couldn't even get points on that because of a huge sack and because they couldn't really convert on their opportunities. But even then, they were down 14 points. So now that they're, entering a short week in a must-win situation, really both teams are in a must-win. You know that both are going to be extremely well coached. But in my opinion, I think it just comes down to the quarterback play. And with that being said, I'm going to pick the Chargers to win this one. Obviously, it's going to be a huge test for Herbert because he's going up against one of the most aggressive defenses in football. But at the same time, Jalen Hurts just had a perfect passer rating against them last week. And, Herbert, like I said, he is coming off a 400-yard performance. So my point is, if Jalen Hurts can do that, there is no excuse why you can't. It has nothing to do with the injuries, has nothing to do with the lack of a running game. You're going to be the one under the biggest of spotlights. And if you're the Chargers defense, you better hope that you can force a play or two that will, keep your team ahead, because they have been extremely shaky all season long, especially in their losing slump. They've lost 3 out of their last 4 games. They've fallen all the way down to second in their division because the Denver Broncos, were able to overcome a comeback against the Giants, but we'll get into that soon. And if you lose this one, let me click the Vikings for a second. If you lose this game, the Chiefs are ahead of you in the division. So this just proves that you've learned absolutely nothing and you're just going to play second fiddle or even the third fiddle once again. But I'm going to pick the Chargers to win 26-20. Now we move on to Sunday's festivities. We don't have any international matchups, so the first game will take place at 1 o'clock p.m. Eastern, 12 p.m. Central. Let's start with the Miami Dolphins and the Atlanta Falcons. Both are coming off pretty unfortunate losses. The Dolphins got absolutely blown out by the Cleveland Browns. The Atlanta Falcons, they kind of got exposed offensively, and their defense had, a hard time shutting down Christian McCaffrey. Atlanta, with the 49ers, their game plan was very simple. It was take Bijan Robinson out of the game and force Michael Penix to win by himself. And you know what? Bijan Robinson, he got held to 40 yards on 14 carries, and Penix, while he was okay at times, he just couldn't push them over the hump. And this was against the 49ers defense without Nick Bosa, without Fred Warner, and they lost one of their starting quarterbacks in the middle of that game. So this was an outstandingly coached game from defensive coordinator Robert Saleh and the head coach Kyle Shanahan. I'll get into it more in just a second when I talk about the 49ers here. But, Atlanta's offense, it was it was a pretty, or the 49ers offense, I should say. The 49ers offense was telling you what they were going to do the whole time. They just said, okay, we're just going to hand the ball to Christian McCaffrey. We'll convert a lot of third downs. We're not going to really implement the wide receivers as much, especially since Juwan Jennings dropped an easy completion that led to the interception that Mac Jones threw. He didn't really do too much throwing the ball, only had 152 yards, but at the same time, you could argue that he didn't really even need to do too much. He just had to manage the game. He just had to make smart decisions. And, even with that interception, Atlanta's offense, they couldn't capitalize on it. And, the 49ers, they were just more solid on both sides of the ball here. So I think that when you go up against the Miami Dolphins, who have the worst rushing defense in the league, I don't think there's any better situation for this team to be in right now, especially when the defense is trash and the offense is turning the ball over left and right. They are dealing with injuries in a multitude of facets. They just put Darren Waller on IR because of a peck, if I'm not mistaken. Obviously, there's still no Tyreek Hill. And, defensively, I mean, it's just a patchwork group right here. And you saw it firsthand against the Cleveland Browns. The minute that I saw that there were going to be wind gusts of up to 50 to 60 miles per hour, I'm like, this is over. Like, the Dolphins are going to have no chance of winning. And right on cue, Tua threw 3 picks. They only scored 6 points off of 2 field goals. They couldn't get in the end zone one time. Jalen Waddle was hardly a factor in that game plan whatsoever. And it just got so bad to the point that, Tua got benched for freaking Quinn Ewers. Okay? I mean, listen, the defense gave up 3 rushing touchdowns, but they did all right for the most part of that second half. They just, if you really think about it, there was the pick six on the first play. Then there was the second one from the end zone in which the Browns got to start from their own 2-yard line. I don't really know what more Miami's defense could have done after halftime, but at the same time, like, Quinshon Judkins, he had a marvelous performance. He had 3 rushing touchdowns, over 80 yards of scrimmage on the ground. I mean, Dylan Gabriel didn't really have that spectacular of a showing, but just like Mac Jones, all he had to do was just not screw up and not get in the way, and, the rest would take care of itself. And now you're in a situation where I don't even know if this is going to be close, to be quite honest with you. Like, the Dolphins are just a huge mess on both sides of the ball. And the longer that Mike McDaniel and Chris Greer are there, the worse that it's going to get. So I hate to say it, but my final score here, where's my pen? My final score for this game is going to be 34-10 in favor of the Falcons here because they can run the ball extremely well. Their defense is still giving up the fewest total yards per game. And, they've been absolutely exceptional under Jeff Ulbrich. The Dolphins, there's no leadership. There's no accountability. There's no responsibility. I know I'm probably being redundant with those words, but the point is there's just no spark at all. And it just doesn't even look like – it feels like they've already quit on the season. So, next up, we have the New Jersey Jets. Yes, I'm saying New Jersey because they do not deserve to represent New York whatsoever, and they play the Cincinnati Bengals. So, the Jets lost to the Panthers. That was honestly not too surprising. They lost 13-6, kind of the same way they lost to the Denver Broncos. 6 sacks given up, 2 interceptions. Justin Fields got benched in the second half for Tyrod Taylor. He ended up throwing 2 interceptions to J.C. Horn. And the Panthers offense was literally doing everything they could to be like, okay, Jets, we'll let you back in. We don't really care if we win this game or not. And their weaknesses and their vulnerabilities and their flaws, they just kept rearing their ugly heads at the worst time. I mean, listen, you can easily scapegoat Eric Glenn, but the fact of the matter is we all knew what situation the Jets were going to be in the minute that they signed Justin Fields. He had the lowest ceiling out of any quarterback in his draft class. He probably has one of the lowest ceilings out of any athletic quarterback in the National Football League because while there are razzle-dazzle plays that, kind of leave you speechless, you just have many more moments where you're like, dude, what are you doing? Just throw the ball or get rid of it or just try to make something happen. Why are you standing still in the pocket or why are you trying to, do too much? Whatever the case may be. And, I mean, at this point, it doesn't really even matter who starts in this game for a multitude of reasons. Number one, because the Jets offense really revolves around Breece Hall and Garrett Wilson, and one of them is out because of a knee injury. And the second is because you're going up against the Cincinnati Bengals, whose defense was abhorrent, as we saw firsthand last week against the Pittsburgh Steelers. Yes, they didn't have Trey Hendrickson, and, they forced 2 interceptions in the first half that, in hindsight, kind of saved them. But there was a point in time where the Bengals realistically could have lost that game. They were down by 1 with 2 minutes left because they couldn't get a single stop. Well, they could only get one stop in the entire second half against Aaron Rodgers. And it relied on Ja'Marr Chase catching 16 passes for 161 yards, Joe Flacco throwing for 342 yards and 3 touchdowns, and Chase Brown, for the first time in who knows how long, running for over 100 yards when they have the single worst rushing attack in the National Football League, the Cincinnati Bengals. So, I mean, at this point, the only way I could believe that the Jets are going to pull off the upset is if I actually see it. I don't think it'll be a blowout. I think it'll be relatively close because, let's face it, the Bengals defense is not great. And, the Jets defense over the last 2 weeks, they played a lot better, against the Broncos and against the Carolina Panthers. But Sauce Gardner's in concussion protocol. And when you're going up against Ja'Marr Chase and T. Higgins, hopefully that, he rests in time, that he doesn't rush himself through the protocol process, and, that he's, gets healthy as soon as possible. That's the first thing to pay attention to more than, the playing, or the timetable itself. But it's just, you're going up against Ja'Marr Chase, T. Higgins, Chase Brown. I mean, the O-line is very shaky, but, I mean, listen, it's the Jets. They'll always find a way to let you down. So, my final score, Olivia Craycraft, I love you. Bengals win 16-10. So, and the reason why I shouted her out is because she's probably the only Cincinnati Bengals fan I know. So, shout out to her. All right, speaking of shout-outs, let's talk about the New England Patriots for a second here because they are 5-2. They are still leading the division with a 5-2 record. Did I just say that? I probably did. And now they're going up against the Cleveland Browns, who are coming off a blowout victory against the Miami Dolphins. Already talked about them. New England, they got up to another slow start. That has unfortunately been the theme for them all season long. Their defense lets up a big scoring drive before they finally settle things down. They figure it out, and they, dominate the rest of the way. The offense, it takes them a little bit to, get in a groove and figure out what to attack and what to exploit before they eventually, find a way to, put the game out of reach. And against the Tennessee Titans, it was no different because they were down 3-0, then 10-3, then 13-10, and then all of a sudden, a kickoff out of bounds gave the New England Patriots the spark they really needed, and a 39-yard bomb down the field to Kayshon Boutte, put them ahead 17-13. And from that point on, the Titans, they just ran out of juice. They didn't really have that much energy left. Cam Ward got sacked 5 more times. He turned the ball over twice. One of them a scoop and score for Caleb Chason, who ended up winning Defensive Player of the Week. Drake May completed 91% of his passes, which is a franchise record. Not even Tom Brady has had a higher completion percentage in his career. And that's the greatest quarterback that has ever touched a football field. So that is just absolutely ridiculous, and it's absolutely phenomenal. And that is honestly the biggest reason why I have the Patriots winning this game. I don't know if the offense is going to be incredibly lights out because this is a respectable Browns defense that they're going up against. Myles Garrett is still an absolute stud. They give up the fewest total yards per game. They're one of the top 5 rushing defenses. They're top 5 in pass. They've slowly risen up to middle of the pack in terms of points allowed, but with Dillon Gabriel, they're not turning the ball over as much. They're still not exceptionally great, but I mean, it's a little bit of a type of offense. There's moments where they're like, oh, okay, this will work, and then there are other moments where you're just like, yeah, this is no bueno. I'm picking the Patriots to win because A, they're at home, and the Browns have not won at home this year, and 2, because I trust Drake May to lead his offensive victory way, way, way more than I do Dillon Gabriel. I think it'll be a relatively low-scoring game. I think these defenses are going to, play scrappy early on, but I think if Cleveland's defense is on the field too long, which I expect to be the case, then I feel like they're going to eventually wear down and tap out. So my final score for this game, Patriots 24, Browns 10. Okay, now we have the New York Giants versus the Philadelphia Eagles. The second time in 3 weeks that these two squads will go head-to-head with one another. Oh, boy. Giants. I already talked about the Eagles. I already gave them their flowers. They bounced back. They did what they needed to do on the road. Jalen Hurts was fantastic. The defense never really, broke at any point in the game. And they just got Brandon Graham out of retirement. So at least there's nostalgia there. The Giants, on the other hand, oh boy, So last week, they played the Denver Broncos on the road, and I thought, okay, this is going to be a huge test for them. I don't know if they're going to have enough to beat them, but I was proven wrong through the first 45 minutes. They were down 19 to nothing, or they were up 19 to nothing, I should say. Jackson Dart was phenomenal throwing the football. He made a lot of good plays with his legs, like we've seen him do, since he, got his first start against the Chargers. Cam Scatterbo was still a menace. Considering the fact that they didn't have Malik Neighbors and that their passing game was a little bit suspect, it was just, they did relatively well for the most part. And the defense really shut down Bo Nix. Really shut him down. I mean, Brian Burns was all over the place. He's having an outstanding season, and he should be near the top of the leaderboard for Defensive Player of the Year. That's how spectacular he's playing, because I think he's got, nine and a half sacks now, and we're not even halfway through the season. The secondary really, squeezed in on the passing game. They clogged up the rushing lanes. Like, it felt like Denver had no chance of winning this game. And then near the start of the fourth quarter, Bo Nix tries to find, I think it was Evan Ingram or Troy Franklin, whoever it was, try to find his target in the end zone, gets popped in the air. Cortland Sutton catches into the corner for a touchdown, and they score on the 2-point conversion. Okay, it was fluky, but whatever. No shutout, and you're still ahead. Because on the next possession, Theo Johnson does the exact same thing. Ricochet pass off the hands of Wan'Dale Robinson. It gets caught by Theo Johnson. He takes it the distance. Now they're up 26-8. So Denver was really, starting to reel a bit defensively. And it just felt like, the offense was just padding their stats at this point. And they did score a touchdown on the next possession. They made it, a 10-point game? So with 5 minutes left, or close to 5 minutes remaining. From the Giants' perspective, all you have to do is just not turn the ball over. Don't do anything to screw up. Take as much time off the clock as possible. Manage the game. Finish the job. Don't give them any chances. And then right on schedule, Jackson Dart threw a horrible interception to Sternad, and the Broncos immediately capitalized off of that. And all of a sudden, it's a 3-point game. The Giants went 3-8 on to the next possession. And then on the biggest 3rd and 11 play of the entire game, Marvin Mims makes an exceptional catch down the field to keep the drive alive. They ended up waltzing their way down the rest of the field, and Bo Nix caps it off with an 18-yard rushing touchdown to put them ahead by 4. Now the Giants got the ball back, and right away it's already 4th and 19, and you're thinking, okay, this game is over. There's absolutely no chance. And on a completion to, I think it was Wan'Dale Robinson, on a completion to him, he gets short of the line of scrimmage, and then a flag gets thrown for roughing the passer. 2 plays later, boom, pass interference at the 1 by Riley Moss, and an added unsportsmanlike conduct penalty from Sean Payton. Literally right away on the next play, Jackson Dart uses his legs to put the Giants ahead by 2 points, and it should have been 3, but the backup kicker, who had already missed an extra point earlier in the first half, missed another kick, and the Giants were only ahead by 2. So instead of the Broncos having to go down the field to send the game into overtime, they needed to go down the field to get in a field goal range and win the football game. And it only took 2 huge completions to Mims and Cortland Sutton to set up a 39-yard field goal attempt for Will Lutz, and the ball split through the uprights, and Denver won 33-32. Like I said, they were down 19 to nothing at the start of the fourth quarter. So the Giants gave up 33 freaking points in 15 minutes. That is absolutely atrocious. And the fact that defensive coordinator Shane Bowen is still there is just absolutely mind-boggling to me. Because that loss right there was fireable on all fronts. Shane, Dable, Kafka, anybody. That was just absolutely inexcusable. And with that being said, I don't even know if they're going to have, their chance to get, to pull off the sweep against the Philadelphia Eagles. They haven't won there since 2013, so they have a historical streak going against them. But 2, and more importantly, I feel like, the Eagles still have a little bit of pent-up anger inside of them. And I think, knowing how they lost and what they did to, put themselves in that situation, I'm sure Philadelphia is just going to take out whatever frustration they still have from that game And I don't know if it'll be a blowout, but I know that the Eagles will, find a way to, split the series, so to speak. So I'm going to pick the Eagles to win this game 24-17. Okay, let me calm down for a second. Now we have the Buffalo Bills versus the Carolina Panthers. It's actually pretty refreshing that both teams have 4 wins, at this point of the season. Carolina is 4-3; they're undefeated at home, and the Bills are coming off a bye week in which 2 weeks ago they lost to the Atlanta Falcons, a team that Carolina shut out 30-0. I'm gonna be honest here. If Bryce Young was in this game, I would actually think that this would be a relatively close game here because the Bills' defense is one of the worst rushing defenses in the league. Carolina has 2 exceptionally capable backs, and Chuba Hubbard and Rico Dowdle that can wreak havoc on any team in the National Football League. And the offense under Bryce Young, it has been relatively solid when you can run the football because it can open up the passing game. And Bryce Young has not done a terrible job turning the ball over in the last 2 weeks. And the defense has somewhat relatively improved. They're opportunistic. They, have a few key playmakers on all 3 levels. And just last week, they showed, some of the flashes that they had against the New York Jets. I know that's not really saying anything, but, they finally got a win on the road. So it was great. But unfortunately, Bryce Young suffered an ankle sprain. He's going to miss this week, which means Andy Dalton is going to be starting. And as much as I like Dalton, I just don't know if the Panthers are going to have enough, of the personnel to pull off an upset against the Buffalo Bills here. I mean, if the Panthers screw up one time, then Josh Allen is going to steal this momentum from start to finish. Both teams have 2 of the top rushing attacks in the league with James Cook on Buffalo side of things, and I just talked about Chuba Hubbard and Rico Dowdle. But if both defenses are going to sell out to stop the run, which I'm guessing that they are, then it's going to come down to the quarterback matchup. And I just think that Josh Allen is going to have a better performance than Andy Dalton. And unfortunately, like I said, 1 3-and-out or 1 turnover, and the Bills are going to just, run the table here. So no pun intended either. So I'm going to pick the Bills to win this game 30-14, unfortunately. Next up, we have the Baltimore Ravens coming off a bye with Lamar Jackson hopefully returning to the lineup from a hamstring injury, going up against the Bears, who have now won 4 games in a row. They just beat the New Orleans Saints 26-14. They ran for 200 yards. They forced 4 turnovers. They sacked Spencer Rattler 4 times. And, they're leading the league in takeaways. They still have some flaws to work on the defensive side of the ball. But offensively, they're starting to get a little better. I mean, the passing game still needs to click, yet they're still you can tell that the improvement is there. And fortunately for them, they're going up against one of the worst defenses in the National Football League that is getting a few of their key players back from injury, Marlon Humphrey and Roquan Smith and, those guys. Lamar Jackson, like I said, hopefully returning to the start of the lineup. That's going to be a huge spark to their offense. If you really had to ask me, what's the key to Baltimore winning this game? A, don't turn the ball over because the Bears are so opportunistic. They lead the league in turnovers, or in takeaways, I should say. And offensively, they got to run the football because the Bears have one of the worst rushing defenses in the National Football League. And if you don't utilize Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry to the best of their abilities, then this is going to be an incredibly one-dimensional performance by them. And the Chicago Bears, they've proven time and time again that if they can force a key play here and there, they can steal this down the stretch. And it doesn't have to be perfect every single time, but it could be enough. So having said all of that, though, because this is in Baltimore, because that this Ravens defense needs to have some pride restored into them, because this offense needs to, figure out their identity, I think that this is going to be a bounce-back win for them. And I think the way for the Chicago Bears to flip that script is if Caleb Williams replicates the performance that he had week 3 against the Dallas Cowboys. So my final score for this game is going to be 31-17. Now we're going to move on to the, if I'm not mistaken, I think there's one more 1 o'clock game. Did I skip one? Hold on, I'm going through my game notes here just to make sure. What time is the 49ers game being played on? Okay, 12 o'clock Central. Okay, so I did miss one. My apologies. 49ers versus the Texans. This is going to be a very very fun revenge game here. And the reason why I say revenge game is because D'Amico Ryans is going up against his former football team, the San Francisco 49ers, the team that allowed him to get that head coaching opportunity. But, it's weird. Like, I should say that both teams are heading in opposite directions because, I mean, the records speak for themselves. The 49ers are 5-2. The Texans are 2-4. But the 49ers are still injured to hell. Brock Purdy, it looks like that he's still not ready to return to the field because he's, is trying to fight through that turf toe injury. And, the defense, they played really well last week, without Nick Bosa, without Fred Warner, without, I think it was Bernardo Green that got hurt. And I think they're better set up for a similar performance against a Texans offense that is just absolutely horrible. They can't run the football. They can't protect C.J. Stroud. They pretty much have no passing attack besides Nico Collins. The defense can only do so much because they forced 4 turnovers last week, yet they still gave up 27 points. I mean, the only touchdown that the Texans scored before, garbage time was on a scoop and score. They're just a really challenged football team right now. And it's like, you'd think firing Bobby Slowick would fix everything, but really this is on ownership and the front office. Like, you knew what the issues were last year. You had no O-line, injuries to the receiving corps. The defense committed a lot of penalties. Joe Mixon, his injury status, that was going to be a huge factor. Yet Nick Caserio, the general manager, pretty much did next to nothing about it. Really, it was just moving around a bunch of deck chairs, trying to make sure everything was in place, yet all of a sudden, one gust of wind just knocks it right over. Whether it's signing Nick Chubb to be your lead back or, bringing in Cam Robinson or trading for Ed Ingram and, acquiring Kenyon Green. Like, really? Like, you think those are win-now moves? I understand that they traded away Laramie Tunsil and they drafted Conley, as his replacement in the second round, if I'm not mistaken. But or Connerly, that's his name. But it's just, you have a third-year quarterback that is trying to come off a sophomore slump. And now we're just looking at him, and we're thinking to ourselves, how much of his rookie year was an anomaly? And now they're going up against a 49ers team that is extremely well coached, that has one of the best running backs in football, whose offense has, looked serviceable even with the amount of injuries that they've been dealing with, and a defense that, brings a lot of juice and a lot of pride and a lot of girth, even with the guys that they've lost. So, I hate to say it, but I don't think that the Texans are going to have much of a chance here at home. I mean, I hope they could do something here, but I think for my final score in this game, I haven't really thought about it too long and hard, but I'm going to go with the low score here. I'm going to say they win 20-14. The 49ers do. Okay, now we are going to move on to the late afternoon window. We have, let's see here, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers versus the New Orleans Saints. I think, listen, the Saints, they came off the loss against the Chicago Bears. It was pretty much the exact same script. Or I wouldn't say the exact same script, but it was pretty much a similar script to how they've lost their other games. Not too surprising that, they played scrappy but couldn't find a way to, take the lead. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers, on the other hand, they got absolutely demolished by the Detroit Lions. I mean, they gave up a touchdown on the opening drive. The defense, forced a couple of key takeaways now and then. They forced a strip sack. They forced an interception. But they also gave up an 83-yard touchdown run to Jahmyr Gibbs that really blew the gates wide open. He ended up finishing with 218 yards on the ground. Late in the second quarter, Mike Evans, who was returning from a hamstring injury, fractured his clavicle, and he's going to miss a huge chunk of the season, which is going to end his streak of 1,000-yard seasons, which is just really heartbreaking and devastating because I was really hoping for him to break the record. Emeka Egbuka, he tried to play from a hamstring injury. You still had two of your starting offensive linemen out, and Chris Godwin didn't play along with Bucky Irving. I get all of that, but I'm not using that as an excuse because the Lions didn't have a huge chunk of their secondary. They didn't have Kirby Joseph. They didn't have DJ Reed. They didn't have Terrion Arnold. Brian Branch was suspended because of that altercation he had against the Chiefs. The Detroit Lions were just as injured themselves, yet they still held Baker Mayfield to 9 points. They forced a couple turnovers. They gave up one touchdown, and that was at the start of the second half, and they didn't really do too. And they never let up a single big play the rest of the way. And I mean, the Detroit Lions just laid an absolute clinic on what we all thought was, the best team of the NFC, and the Lions just completely ripped that mantle away from them. So I think entering the Superdome, the Bucs are set up for a huge bounce back performance. The last time they played in the Superdome, they ran for 277 yards. They scored 51 points. Baker Mayfield threw 4 touchdown passes, and this was Spencer Rattler's first start in the NFL. I mean, yes, Baker Mayfield threw 3 interceptions, which allowed the Saints to take a lead in the second quarter, but the rest of the way, Tampa Bay, seized all the momentum. They did not make it a close game, and they just proved to be, the vastly superior football team. So I think we're going to get a more similar script for this one. I say the Bucs win 34-23. Okay, now we have the game that I think everyone's going to be glued into, before the primetime games, of course. The Dallas Cowboys versus Denver Broncos. So we talked about Denver and their incredible comeback. I'm going to give Bo Nix his flowers because in that fourth quarter, he had 4 total touchdowns. He really put the team on his back. He didn't have a single drive in that fourth quarter where he didn't score or put them in position to win. The defense really tightened up. They had the huge interception that gave them the momentum that they needed to get back into the game. And while they did let up a couple of bad touchdown drives, I still think that, for the most part, Denver did what they needed to do to win. They persevered in the fourth quarter, and the Giants just completely fell apart. The Cowboys, they're coming off a more convincing performance against the Washington Commanders. They won 44-22 at home. Dak Prescott once again rose his way up the MVP ladder. He had 264 yards, 3 touchdown passes, no interceptions. Javonte Williams had well over 110 rushing yards. He's catapulted up all the way up to being one of the top 5 leading rushers in the NFL. CeeDee Lamb came back from injury and, had a huge 79-yard touchdown that really opened the floodgates for Dallas. And, him and George Pickens are proving to be one of the best receiving tandems in the National Football League. But the best part about it was that their defense was absolutely incredible, and it had their best game of the season. After Dallas went down the field to score on their opening drive, they forced a 3-and-out. They get pinned at their 1-yard line. Javonte Williams gets tackled in the end zone. It's a safety. Washington's offense is able to capitalize by scoring a go-ahead touchdown. And then they forced, a 2-point conversion stop. So Dallas was ahead, only down by 1 now instead of, potentially 3. And the minute that Dallas jumped back out in front, they never gave up the lead the rest of the way. Dallas's defense, they forced a couple of turnovers. One of them a pick six from Deron Bland. And yes, Jaden Daniels did get hurt with a hamstring pull, and Marcus Mariota had to take over the rest of the way. But I feel like even if Jaden Daniels got hurt or didn't get hurt, then I don't think the outcome would have changed. Having said all of that, though, this is going to be the biggest test of the year for the Dallas Cowboys. And the reason why is more of a historical reason. They have not beaten the Denver Broncos since 1995. It has been 30 years since they last won a game. And that is ironically the last time the Cowboys even won a Super Bowl. So the last 2 quarterbacks to win, the previous 2 meetings were Trevor Siemian and Teddy Bridgewater. And both of them had outstanding performances. So I think Bo Nix is in perfect position to, be the next in line against a pretty abhorrent Dallas defense itself. But I think the one way to maintain this streak and to keep it alive is if you don't turn the ball over, because Dallas's offense has been absolutely phenomenal all season long. Brian Schottenheimer, I thought he was not going to work out there, but he has proven that this offense is way more innovative and creative than it ever was under Mike McCarthy. But this Denver defense, it's no joke. They got the leading sacker in Nick Bonito. You still have Patrick Surtain as the reigning defensive player of the year. You have so many playmakers on all 3 levels. And I think, Denver has the personnel to really, key in on this Dallas offense. And in one of the toughest home field advantages in the National Football League, it's going to take near perfection for the Cowboys to, get it done here. So I think the Broncos are going to win this game 30-20. And now we get it to probably the biggest or the most boring game of the entire slate. And no, I'm not talking about the Jets and Bengals. Honestly, the 1 o'clock window is what it is. The Colts and the Titans, I'm just going to make a long story short. This is going to be a blowout. I think it's going to be a sweep. The Colts are just so much better on all 3 levels of the game. Their offense is absolutely fantastic with Jonathan Taylor and Daniel Jones. Their defense is the ultimate bend but don't break unit. They give up a lot of yards, but they don't let up too many points. Cam Ward, he's been sacked 31 times, which is the most by far out of any quarterback in the National Football League. He only has 5 touchdown passes and 4 interceptions. The running game is in circles. They don't really have much of a passing attack. The defense can only do so much because it's on the field for so long. And I mean, they just get visibly outplayed and outcrushed, and they get their hearts ripped out pretty much every single time they take the field. It doesn't matter how fast they start. There's just going to be a point in time you're like, okay, how are they going to screw this up? And the one time that they didn't was against Arizona in week 4. So I'm just going to get right to it. My final score, Indianapolis Colts win 41-13. And they still are the number 1 team in the AFC, which I don't think anybody anticipated at the start of the season. Actually, I know that nobody actually thought this was possible. So moving on. Sunday Night Football, we have the Steelers versus the Packers. Here we go. Aaron Rodgers against his former team and former backup quarterback Jordan Love. The teacher versus the student. You know, everyone's talking about how much of a big game this is going to be for Aaron Rodgers. Nobody's really thinking about how much it would mean to Jordan Love. I mean, the Steelers have the second worst passing defense in the National Football League. They are 5th in sacks and they're 7th in takeaways. But Green Bay has a lot of the pieces to make this an exciting dogfight. You got Josh Jacobs and you got Matthew Golden and Jaden Reed and Tucker Kraft and those guys. One of the best offensive lines in football. So Green Bay could definitely keep this team on its heels. But the Pittsburgh Steelers have not lost to the Packers at home since 1970. That is a very long time. And the Steelers, while they did lose to the Cincinnati Bengals and to Joe Flacco because of their defense and, 2 turnovers from their offense, they were up by 2 minutes. You saw the amount of flashes that their offense had. They had a lot of huge plays down the field. They were running the ball exceptionally well. They were near unstoppable on 3rd down. And unfortunately, the defense couldn't get the final stop of the last drive. But I feel like at home on a primetime stage, they should have a lot of their pride, reinvigorated, especially against the Packers team that has been a little bit shaky defensively the last few weeks. I mean, last week against Arizona, they were playing from behind most of the way, but I mean, there were a couple of questionable 4th down decisions that, allowed Green Bay to not only stay in the race, but take the lead in the 4th quarter. And when Arizona had a chance to close the deal, they just, they wilted at the worst possible time. They played from ahead for the first 45 minutes. And in the final 15, they only scored 3 points. And, they couldn't finish and they couldn't close the deal. It was the exact same way they lost to the Indianapolis Colts on the road. Solid numbers from Jacoby Brissett, don't get me wrong, but I mean, it was just not well enough to win. So I think, the Steelers and Micah Parsons had 3 sacks. I didn't even mention that part. But I think the Steelers, they're going to win this one at home. I believe in Aaron Rodgers more than I do Jordan Love. And if Aaron Rodgers does win this game, he will have beaten all 32 teams in the National Football League. Having said that, though, I don't think this is going to be as much of a high-scoring game as I sort of hyped it up to be. I think both defenses are going to play really well. I feel like it's going to be a dogfight all the way to the very end. But, like I said, I trust Aaron Rodgers to get the last laugh against his former team over Jordan Love. So my final score is 23-20, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, 23-20. All right, Monday Night Football. We got the Chiefs versus the Commanders. If Jaden Daniels was healthy, I would have really been excited because I would say, okay, this is going to be a high-scoring game. Both quarterbacks are going to be phenomenal. This was the Super Bowl preview that we really wanted. But he is out, and Marcus Mariota takes over. I'm going to be quite honest here. I don't think this is going to be as lopsided of a game as, some people make it out to be. Let's go back to the 2017 wild card between the Kansas City Chiefs and the Tennessee Titans. The Titans were down 21-3 in the first half. And Marcus Mariota brought them all the way back by scoring 19 unanswered points to win the game 22-21 and beat the Chiefs at Arrowhead Stadium. Even if they did not have enough to beat Tom Brady and the New England Patriots next round, that was the most signature performance of Marcus Mariota's career in the NFL. Unfortunately, this is going to be impossible to repeat because Patrick Mahomes is not exactly Alex Smith. So I would probably say that, and Washington's defense, they just lost their best pass rusher, Dorrance Armstrong, to a season-ending knee injury, and he has been having an outstanding season. If he didn't get hurt, he'd be one of the top 5, leading sackers in the National Football League without question. And Washington's defense has been very, very, very shaky to be nice about it, through most of the season. There are times where they're decent, and then there are other games where they're just like, ugh, a la last week against the Dallas Cowboys. So Kansas City, they got Rashee Rice back from his suspension. Xavier Worthy's been healthy. Travis Kelce is looking like his old self. They're running the ball extremely well. They're minimizing the penalties on both sides of the ball. Their defense is playing more together and connected. And unfortunately for the rest of us, they are looking like they are looking like the team to beat in the AFC. Because like I said, they're healthy. They got their swagger back. They got their mojo. They're clicking on all cylinders. And they did right what we all thought they were going to do, which was shut out the Las Vegas Raiders at home 31-0 and not even make it a fair fight. I mean, they were taking knees in garbage time because it was just so boring and because it was just that bad. I mean, the Raiders had like 3 first downs. They were a goose egg on 3rd down and 4th down. Geno Smith only had 67 yards. They pretty much took away the entire running game. They made Ashton Janney not a factor whatsoever. And on the defensive side, Max Crosby got hurt. And I know they took him out because of precautionary measures, but the Raiders defense is literally one freaking guy. And without him, there's just no life and no optimism whatsoever. So I'm going to pick the Chiefs to win this game by double digits. I'm going to say they win 30-20. We'll see what happens with Terry McLaurin if he's healthy enough to play. I mean, Deebo Samuel, he's still been limited. So there's still some question marks to answer in the passing game, especially without Jada Daniels. But at home, on a primetime stage, I just feel like the Chiefs are going to just make more plays on both sides of the ball to, pull ahead. They're the better team. They're expected to, take care of business. And because of that, they'll be tied with the Chargers. And the only reason why they'd be behind is because they lost to LA in week 1. So there you have it. The picks are locked, and let's wrap it up. Thank you all so much for watching. Make sure you like and subscribe for additional content. And we hope that you are all dialed in next week.